Writer's Dream. This is a show where we have authors talking about how they write their books, how they publish their books, and how they market their books. You can find us on Facebook. Just look for The Writer's Dream. You can message me on Facebook if you want to be on the show. We are also on LTV. If you go on ltv-eh.org and look for videos, you will see a list of shows and you can find us there. We're also on Cablevision Channel 20 on Long Island. We're on Thursdays at 3 p.m. And we're on Cablevision. Just look for my name, Linda Maria Frank, and you will find many, many videos with many, many authors and lots of good books from local authors and distant authors, and also good advice if you're trying to get into the writing field. Today's guest is Malve Von Hassell, and Malve is probably one of the most prolific writers I've ever had on the show. She really has written a great many books in a great many genres. The book that we're going to feature today is called The Price of Loyalty, Serving Adela of Blois. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about Malve because I know that she's very shy and she's not going to tell you how wonderful she is. She has written, first of all, I'll tell you that she is a researcher and a translator. She's a writer and a teacher. She has taught at Queens College, Baruch College, Pace, and Suffolk Community College. She has written memoirs. She's written a memoir based on her mother's experiences in Nazi Germany. I will let her tell you about that. She's also written children's books, Letters from the Tooth Fairy. Is there anything else you'd like to tell us about yourself, Malve?
I've just been extremely fortunate to be able to write books which I have loved, and I've loved every one for different reasons. And it's a privilege to be able to immerse oneself in such writing projects.
Well, your books they're fascinating to me. And one of the most fascinating things about many of your books is the time period that they take place in. I love that time period. The Price of Loyalty, Serving Adela, takes place at probably around 1066, right around the time of the Norman invasion. And I just love that period because I think so many things were happening and changing. Certainly for English-speaking people, the influence of the French language on the English language. I was writing a book. Actually, it wasn't a book. I was doing a PowerPoint on the relationship between plants, poisons, and plots. And in order to do the research, I had to read some gardening manuals that were written by English authors, but it was old. They were written in Old English.
Yeah.
And it was so interesting to see what that language was like before the French influence. So I like that period. So tell us about the book before we go.
Well, that period is absolutely important. You're right, because it's partly the beginning of the building of the nation states and shaping of Europe. And of course, it starts with the Battle of Hastings and the conquest of England, because Adela was born in 1067, roughly. We don't know exactly when she was born. And the book spans her entire life. She lived until 1137.
So this is based on a real person.
It's based on a real person. I use I use two fictional characters as a way of highlighting her life. And since I covered the entire period, I needed a background. I needed more of a context. So I created these two fictional characters that were part of her story. One was a young man who came from England as an orphan and was raised at the court where Adela grew up and became a very close friend of Adela's. He, in fact, to some extent, he loved her. And he continued to serve her after her marriage to Stephen Henry de Blois. And the other character that I used as a way to highlight Adela's story is the young French woman who ends up marrying the Englishman. And we see Adela through their stories and their eyes and their experiences. And it is a lot about loyalty, the conflicts that those two characters experience in serving Adela and yet also trying to live a life and not be swallowed up by their duties to this fairly autocratic woman.
So tell me about research. I see that you're a researcher, and since this book is based on a real person, how was that? How did you do your research?
It was fascinating. In a way, it's a journey of discovery. In a sense, you might say that Adela presents a problem because there are many things we don't know and we have to guess at. We don't know what she looked like. We don't even know exactly when she was born or exactly how many children she had. We don't know her feelings about a lot of the things that happened to her. And yet, on the other hand, we have her letters written by her and letters that she received. And some of these letters are from her husband while he was on crusade. And there were letters from all sorts of church people, the Archbishop of Canterbury, the Bishop of Chartres, who reprimanded her at various points very sternly for actions that he did not approve of. So we have these letters, and the letters also show how educated she was, how varied her interests. She was interested in literature, she was interested in art, she was interested in many different things, and she took a very active interest in the well-being of all the places that were under her rule. There were at least 300 places, villages, estates, properties that she had control of. And while her husband was away on crusade, and later after his death, she ruled the domain. And it was a formidable domain. It was like a country in a sense.
And
Uh,
that's interesting because we always think of women in that time of having absolutely no power.
yes,
And there she was, not only ruling things, but her interests are so varied.
yes.
It makes her a fascinating character.
This was actually, in a way, one of my main, if you will, the main message or the main point that I
Theme.
wanted to bring across. That in that time period, in that strict medieval, highly patriarchal setting, yet you had women taking a very active role, especially during the age of the Crusades, taking an active role in running estates and fighting battles. There were women that also joined the Crusades themselves and took an active role. But I was, in a way, more interested in what happened to the women at home. So, from the point of view of Adela, who was a very wealthy and very powerful lord, she was known as Lord, Countess and Lord.
Ah,
And her husband called her Domina, the Lord, the female Lord. Um, and the other character is this young French woman who marries my English character. She is of no rank whatsoever, but she also has to run the property that she and her husband own while her husband goes away on crusade. So, from those two angles, I show the role of women in that period.
and
And
that's
it is
interesting.
surprising.
But it's interesting because during World War II, the women here in America, and I only, am familiar with that,
Yes,
really did all of the work that because all of the men were fighting. So when the men go away and
absolutely.
fight, the women take over, and then the
Yes,
women come back. I mean, the men come back, and we all have to make chocolate chip cookies.
yes.
It's
Yes.
a little
Actually, I
unfair.
show some of that tension. I mean, Rosie the Riveter
That's
was
right.
sent back to the kitchen when the men came back. Even
Yes.
during World War One, the same thing happened, and in
Hmm.
Germany as well.
Hmm.
And in this story, Giselle, the wife of Serdic, the young man from England, is very proud of the job that she did while her husband was away. And when he comes back, he is a little bit unsure and uprooted because he
Mhm.
sort of feels, well, she handled everything already, and he doesn't have a place anymore. And their marriage is frayed a little bit because of this, and they have
Yep.
to figure out how to handle that um, set of misunderstandings.
Well, I think that tension that is developed when women have to take over, whether it's because a man is away at war or because, for instance, if he's in an accident and he loses the ability
Yes,
for his recovery time to take care of things, that there's a tension that's produced, and probably here in America after World War II, this was the beginning of the commonness of divorce
yes, yes,
because it just wasn't going to work anymore.
yeah.
The whole societal order was upset.
Yeah. From the perspective of Adela, there's another element that I found fascinating. Her husband was basically, as far as I can tell, a fairly easygoing man who enjoyed life. And Adela was very religious and insisted that he go on crusade. And he was not very eager to do so, but he did. And she financed his crusade. She put up all and it was quite expensive to put together a crusade of a powerful person because he needed an entire train of vassals, knights that were coming with
Oh,
him, and
sure.
servants, and so on and so forth. So he went, and he abandoned the crusade at a critical point where he had decided it was a lost cause. He left and returned home, laden with treasures, but he returned home and he surrendered these treasures to his wife, but his wife was not pleased. And for the space of a year, Adela terrorized him, essentially, according to all descriptions. And he did go back on the so-called Crusade of the Faint-Hearted,
Oh, dear.
because he was not the only one that abandoned the Crusades, and she insisted that he go back. And I found this fascinating.
Uh-huh.
And she ultimately paid a price for this in the fact that her husband died in Ramla in a battle in the east. And 2 years later, she ended up being a widow, and then she governed his estates until she ended up retiring. So she was, uh, as a wife and as a widow, she was quite powerful.
I,
So this element of sending her husband back, I found fascinating.
how did you find her?
Pure luck. I don't know anymore. I know
Because you're a
that
researcher, right?
I fell over her a long time ago in my first book, which features a young man with a falcon.
Oh,
He
yes.
runs away with the falcon, and he lives in northern Germany. There was no such thing as northern Germany, but he lives in the north in a region that is now Germany. And he had this falcon, and he named the falcon Adela because he had heard of Adela, the powerful and
Wow.
intelligent countess. And so he wanted to honor her. And somehow that stuck in my head,
And
and
that was
I
called The
remembered her.
Falconer's Apprentice. That was the book, The
Yeah,
Falcon.
yeah,
Yes, I found that, in looking at all of your works, I found that to be a fascinating book as well. Yes, because I do really love that period. I think when I was very young, I used to read the books by, who is the lady now? I'm not going to be able to, Anya Seton. She
yes.
wrote all the books about Merlin the magician. And of course, I was fascinated by that as a young
Yeah.
person. Um, so, you have a degree in anthropology. I'm sure that helps you with your research.
Well, it shapes the way in which I approach something. I
Mhm.
I like to uh, bring all the aspects of daily life into a book. And as an anthropologist, you really want to look at the economy, at religion, at traditions, at the way in which people have sex, the way in which people talk to each other. You want to look at everything and provide a holistic approach. So that has very much shaped my way of thinking and the way in which I try to write. And my favorite thing is writing about daily life. So, for instance, I spent a little bit of time writing about beekeeping and some of the challenges for beekeeping. And beekeeping was one of the bee wax and honey. Those were main industries in France at that time. Bee
Absolutely.
wax was incredibly important for all the churches,
Mhm.
candles, light,
Mhm.
literally. So my character Giselle and her husband, they had honey bees and they also had wine. They raised wine. And I enjoyed looking at things and talking about the details of what is involved when you produce beeswax and wine, and when what happens during the harvest and how you process the wine. And as an anthropologist, that's gold. Uh, Being able to present
Absolutely.
daily life like that.
And also, people take so much for granted. They don't really think about how something comes to be,
Yes.
you
And the
know.
other thing that this shows up is that things haven't changed that much. Uh, in some ways, things have changed profoundly,
Mhm.
but uh, there's something absolutely bewitching about looking at these day-to-day life issues because it makes you realize they were human. They had human problems. They had problems that, in some ways, we all understand. We understand trying to figure out a better way of doing something. So, for instance, with beekeeping, they were trying to figure out better systems for the hives or how to be safe when removing the honey. Things
Mhm.
like that.
Yes.
They're very real, they're very grounded, and they give us a sense of these people in the 11th century being just like we are at some level. Yes,
Yes.
very different, but also very much like us. By the way, to get back to the research question that you asked, and that's another point that I wanted to make. Um, when Today, when you read the newspaper, or when you listen to media, or you listen to, I don't know, any report, you have to always keep in mind that those are slanted and subjective and sometimes just outright false.
Uh-huh.
So, as an anthropologist, one of the things an anthropologist has to do is has to cross-check and use different sources. And with Adela, the fascinating part there is that there were some contemporary historians who absolutely despised her. And when you read their descriptions, it reads a little bit like reading the National Enquirer because you feel the ideological venom so very distinctly. And you read some of these historians from the 11th, 12th century writing about, say, Adela's son, King Stephen, the future King Stephen, or her brother, the first King Henry, the son of William the Conqueror. When historians write about these, some of them adored them and some of them were very critical. So you have to be very careful. And in that sense, there's no difference between the 11th century and today.
I was
You
just going
have
to say that nothing changes.
nothing changes. And
Also,
yeah,
excuse me, but you made a very important point in that in your stories, you try to bring in, being an anthropologist, try to bring in all of the factors that affect a particular situation. And that's so important with what's exactly happening in the news today, without getting political about it, is something happens. And unless the people who are in charge look at all of the ways that the factors that we live with impact on that situation, or that
yeah,
situation impacts on
yeah,
those factors like the economy, like the stock market, like
yeah,
anything you want to talk about, unless they consider that, they are bound to make some pretty bad mistakes.
absolutely. If you were to teach social sciences
Mhm.
and you have students that say, well, I checked it on AI and this is what I came up with, basically you try to say, look, that's not quite enough. Even just going on Wikipedia might provide you with more context, but it's still not necessarily enough. You do need to check original sources. You need to check different sources. It's
Yeah,
as simple as that.
I try to get that across. I taught forensic science at Hofstra, and I used to tell them, do not use just Wikipedia. And
Yes.
Wikipedia was in its infancy at the time, so it
Yeah.
wasn't as good as it is now,
It
as
is rather
broad as
wonderful.
it is.
Yeah.
So, but I just couldn't convince them now.
No,
What can I say? But yes, so um, we have a few minutes left, and I would like you to, first of all, was there a particular message that you were trying to get across in this particular book?
not per se. I wanted to not focus on just one slice of time. I wanted to show the entirety of this one woman's life, from her childhood, which was partly conjecture,
Mhm.
to her retirement in an abbey where she lived until the end. And I wanted to show the entirety of it because she remained a very active and very engaged person, literally until the year she died. She took an active interest in ensuring that her son would inherit the throne of England. Uh, in about 17 years before Adela died, she had a major tragedy in her life in the sense that there was the White Ship disaster. And with the White Ship disaster, about 300 people drowned, including the heir of the King of England and Adela's daughter, her husband, all sorts of other cousins and nephews, a lot of young people died. Her son Stephen, by a pure stroke of good luck, ended up leaving the ship before it left the harbor and lived. And the minute this happened, Adela immediately started thinking in terms of, well, Stephen is the uh, logical heir to the throne of England. And she lived to see him become the new king. What she did not live to see was that there was um, subsequently anarchy in England because Stephen's kingship was contested by another cousin. But Adela took an active interest. And in that sense, I wanted to show this formidable woman's life from the beginning to the end. Very often you hear about somebody and what they did when they are 60, 70 becomes irrelevant. And this is not the case. It is
It's just getting
sad to
started.
reduce a life to just marriage or a few years. There's way more to life than that. And she was actively engaged in charity work and in doing things for the various estates which she cared about until the end.
This is a fascinating story. And we have a few minutes left, and I would like to give you the opportunity to talk about any one of your other books, any one of your books that just strikes you as something you want to just give us a short message about.
Okay, since we mentioned The Falconer's Apprentice, one of the reasons why I like writing historical fiction is because of the sheer beauty of things that you discover. So in The Falconer's Apprentice, I have a story where my character is involved in the attempt to free King Enzio. King Enzio was the son of the emperor, and he happened to be captured by the city-state of Bologna as a young man, and he never got out. But there were many attempts to free him. But while he was in prison, he wrote poetry. And his poetry is part of what is known as the Sicilian School of Poetry, which became the base for the future sonnet and for Dante's work. And Enzio's poetry is so moving and so accessible. And So you're so overwhelmed when you read it, because there he was in prison and he wrote about a falcon flying into the sky and filled with joy. And he writes about being in prison and being forgotten,
Mhm.
uh, being not heard of again. And you read this and you're just overwhelmed. So being able, when you write for historical fiction, and in this particular case, this sort of poetry, it just fills you. It's a wonderful thing, and I try to share this with the readers. It's a journey of discovery. And
I'm
in
going
the,
to read that book. I am.
I also had so much fun. It includes a building built by the emperor called Castel del Monte, which is a UN heritage building. Castel del Monte consists of it's like a modern structure, 8 towers. Each tower is octagonal. The entire building is octagonal. And when you stand in the center, it's all in white sandstone. And you
I
stand in
have
this,
I have to stop you now because we're
sorry,
almost out of time.
no,
Thank
yes,
you so much. This was fascinating, and I highly recommend the the book that we're talking
the
about
price of
with the
loyalty,
falconer and also the price of
of
loyalty.
loyalty.
Show it. There you
Can you
go.
see it? Uh,
Yes, wait, that's it. Beautiful, beautiful. Thank
Thank
you so
you.
much, Melba. This was so much fun.
Thank you, Lynn.
And I look forward to seeing you at the LIAG meetings one of these times.
Yes, yes, I am actually talking. I'm giving a presentation
Oh,
on
good.
book scams, fake scams that writers fall for.
Excellent. Excellent. All right.
Thank you.
LTV's programming is made possible by the New York State Council on the Arts, with the support of the Office of the Governor and the New York State Legislature.